Hi, so as some of you may know, been watching my stream over the past week, I've been starting to play a little bit more of Lord of the Rings Online recently. There is a new expansion coming out on Monday, which is the Mordor expansion, and I'm going to be doing some streaming of that, some extra streaming of that, which will be from 2 PM UK time. There's been a few changes with it if people haven't played it for a few years. In fact, there's some people haven't played it at all. Some people come onto my stream and say, "Ooh, what's this?" Basically, there's a new company taken over. It was run by Turbine for quite some time. They've sort of decided not to carry on with it anymore. Mostly it's believed because they want to focus on the mobile market. Another company has taken it over, which seems to be comprised largely of people who were working on it at Turbine through most of its life. Now, I haven't played the game in years, but I did start up again last week, as I say, to get back into it a bit, because first of all, I was thinking to myself, well, the Mordor expansion is coming, so it must be getting quite close to the end. But then actually finding out that, with someone else taking it over, they've obviously got long-term plans for it. And there are many charms to the game that I quite like, so maybe it would be a good game to get into just on a casual basis. So what is it like for those who don't know what it's like? Well, I'm going to be giving a few comparisons with World of Warcraft, of course, because not only was that the standard for so many years and still sort of is for MMOs, but of course because it is my MMO of choice as well. Well, the first thing is the UI, and it is a lot more customizable, especially for such an old game. This is now 10 years old. You can drag whatever you want, wherever you want. You can also resize it. Now, this is one of the areas where it's sort of good and bad. If we go into the options, particularly the UI options, UI settings, there's absolutely loads of them, but it can be a little bit unwieldy. It's a good thing that there's lots of settings you can change, lots of things you can adjust the size of. It's not so good in that it only has a few different categories for them, so finding what you want as a new player can mean an awful lot of reading all the way down here, for example. The always loot all, for example, is in amongst a load of things that you wouldn't think it really belongs with. It's just under MISC, which you would think is a fairly obvious one to want in there. In terms of where I am at the moment, of course, I've just done a video on this recently. It has player housing, and it has from the start. So it could be argued that it was one of the first major title MMOs to have player housing. As you can see, it's like a neighborhood. Anyone can get into this neighborhood to have a look around. Even though each neighborhood is instanced, anyone can access it. You don't need special permission. But obviously then to go into the home, that is instanced. Mine's a little bit bare because I don't play this game much. And when I last played it and was getting a few cosmetic items, I don't actually know where a lot of them gone. Because when I came back to the game, of course, my house originally was gone. The way it works in this game is you have to pay upkeep on your house. So if I click on maintenance, you can see that I can deposit an upkeep up to a certain period of time. At the moment, this one should last until the end of August. But if I didn't keep up the maintenance after that point, then it would temporarily sort of disappear. I'd be given a certain amount of time to be able to pay that maintenance. But after that, the house would be gone. I'd have to get another one. But all my equipment and all my furnishings would go into escrow, so I can get those back at any time. So let's have a look at some exterior of houses, at any rate, because I can't just wander into other people's houses that have been playing the game a little bit better, because I noticed some of my neighbours have got some cunning things around. There are different sizes of house. This is a really small hovel with a really big rock in the garden. Let's go and find a much bigger one. They are guild-type houses, what they're called kinship houses, because guilds in this game are called kins. There's one there, but I think that one's for sale. I don't think anyone's bought that one. Again, here's a house with some ornaments in it, which could well be cosmetic items they've got from special events, or maybe even from raiding. Now, here's a kinship house for a guild that looks like it's reasonably active in various things. You've got a number of what look like trophies in it. Again, reminders of past exploits. One of the very best parts of the game, of course, is that it is the world of Tolkien. Anyone who's interested in fantasy, ultimately it's very difficult to imagine someone who would not be a big fan of Tolkien. After all, almost every fantasy game that's ever made it big has in some small or large way been influenced by Tolkien's works. Ultimately, Tolkien's works influenced Dungeons & Dragons, and Dungeons & Dragons as an RPG game system seems to have influenced everything else. So here we are outside the Prancing Pony, for example, a key marker in Bree. In terms of the way the general ebb and flow of the game goes, I'm not going to talk too much about, end game or anything like that, because obviously I haven't played that for years. Any number of things have changed. But there are a couple of things of notice. There are daily quests to keep you busy. There's plenty of things to keep you busy in this game. Not always in a good way, but I'll go through that and you can decide for yourself. You also have this thing that pops up every day, which are Hobbit gifts. So every day you get to open a silver one for free, and every week a gold one for free. And they have random things in them. We'll see what we get today. You can sometimes even get gear in them, or you just get some consumable, some scroll, buff scroll or something like that. Sometimes it's just a little bit of silver. You can actually, if you're a gambling addict, get more of them by using what are called mithril coins. Now, there are a number of currencies in this game. Mithril coins being one of them, of which, of course, you can get more on the online store. This is a free-to-play mode game. So, effectively, there is a subscription model. You can get a subscription. I always think it's worthwhile if you're going to play it any length of time. But it is a free-to-play game. And in theory, you can actually play it absolutely free-to-play if you put enough into it. You'd have to spend a lot of time playing it. Almost everything has to be bought through the online store. That includes quests. Not one by one, but whole rafts of quests for like zones or parts of zones. So, but what you can do if you grind a lot and do a lot of what are called deeds, then you can actually earn the Lord of the Rings Online points, and you could then use those to buy access to parts of the game. So what are deeds? Well, deeds exist for a number of things. So in particular areas here, so Breeland where I am, so we can see Explorer here. So there's one particular thing I haven't explored. When I complete them all, these deeds, I get a few rewards. In this case, I get marks. Marks are really good for bartering. I'll show you that in a moment. I get a few potions. I get some rep, for example. This particular one, if I complete this, you'll notice I get 10 LOTRO points. And these are ones that you can then spend on the online store. So for someone who really does want to play free-to-play and has a ridiculous amount of time to go and grind all these things out, you could, in theory, get enough LOTRO points to basically get the essentials to carry on playing. But it's a lot of effort there. You also get, potentially, stats from some of these. Now, the way these work, and this is part of the grind, there are different traits in the game. There's quite a lot of different traits. Now, if I just pick on this one, for example, Zeal. So this one increases maximum morale, which is your health, physical mitigation, and armor value. Now, what you do with these is you pick 5 of them that are going to be most suitable for your class and your style of play. And these are the ones displayed here. These are not necessarily up to date, actually. I need to probably look up a guide and see if these are still relevant. But these were certainly the ones I had at the time. And they've all got different ranks, you can see. Rank 8, 10, 8, 13, 8. So what you have to do to get more ranks of these things, it's nothing to do with leveling. You have to complete deeds. And this is where a lot of the grind is. Now, some of these deeds I was showing you are largely exploration deeds. But there are other types of deeds as well. It's called Slayer deeds. So, for example, one typical thing that will happen is you'll be attacking a mob and you'll kill a mob in a particular zone, especially when you've just first come to that zone. And it'll tell you, oh, you've accessed a deed now. Kill 10 of these things. And you go, okay, I'll kill 10 of them. You're probably going to do that for the quest anyway. And then you complete that deed and it says, well done, here's a title. You know, the whatever Slayer. Then it says, now go to part 2. Kill, say, 30 of them. The actual number can vary. It can be less, it can be more. And then you'll do that and it'll give you another little reward there. Maybe some potions or something like that. Then it'll say, well done. Excellent. Now kill about 60 of them. But, and you think, at that point you're thinking, sod that, I'm not killing, I'll have killed 100 by then. Bugger it. But no, because that's the one where it gives you the trait. So then you're thinking, oh, I want that trait. So so I'd better do it. So it's not uncommon, and I've seen it just riding around today, for people to get groups together, to go to areas, to basically just kill things and get these deeds done for the traits that they most want. Because, of course, as I say, these are stats. These are things that make your character more powerful. Ah, but it's free to play with an online store here, you say. Is there another way to get these? Well, yes, there is. You can actually buy packs of traits on the online store. So for people who sort of consider things like that pay to win, which, you know, little way it is, yes, there are things on the online store beyond just cosmetic things and convenience things that you can get that will get your character more powerful. That includes being able to buy packs of these traits. They're not particularly cheap to do so. So looking in here as well of the traits, there were other things in there as well. There's a talent system. The talent system is very much like in the earlier days of WoW. It became a fairly standard system here with 3 different areas, and you can put points into them as you wish, but of course it's hierarchical effectively. To get access to the ones lower down, which are the more powerful ones, you have to spend them further up. So there's always one you're probably going to favour and then spend in additional points in another one. You'll notice here you can actually change your spec between 2 different ones, and then you can access a third one if you wanted to, additional slot for the mithril coins, which again you get off the online store. Then there are other abilities you get that are related to your race, so you get sort of racials, but in what is quite a good system here, you actually get to choose again which ones you want. So we've got 9 here. I pick the 5 that I think I'm going to use the most often, that I would prefer. So again, another way of customizing your character. Now, in terms of customizing, there's also the cosmetic side of it, which is a really good system. What in WoW you'd call transmog. We call them cosmetic outfits here, and it's excellent. There's main advantages of this one. First of all, this is the outfit I'm wearing at the moment. Now, it doesn't matter what gear I put on, this is what I'm going to look like. So if I put on a different piece of gear, I don't have to transmog, if you use the WoW term, that item, because this is the set I'm wearing. This is what I'm just going to look like. And with the click of a button, I can set up different outfits. I might decide to look like that. I might decide to look like that. Or like that if I want to go up to the Misty Mountains or something. Nice Arctic feel. You'll notice there's additional ones you can unlock. Again, go to the online store. There's any free-to-play game that is actually properly free to play and you don't have to have a subscription for. Obviously, you're going to be having lots of things on the online store to tempt you to part with your money. It's not a charity. And of course, if I just want to wear that, if I just choose that, I just click that, and there we go. I'm in that one. I'm going to go back to that one because I quite like that one. You'll notice you can turn on and off certain things as well. Show or hide helmet. You can do this for a number of the different pieces, including the weapons if necessary. It also opens it up to a lot of content. Some people will obviously do content to actually get these cosmetic items. And there's a system of dyes in here. For example, this black tunic I'm wearing wasn't actually originally black. I dyed it that so that it actually sort of matched everything else. So you can get gear and think, oh, well, I quite like that, but not in that colour. And you can use some dyes, which can be crafted or bought off the auction house, to use that as well. That brings us on to the crafting system. The crafting system is a little strange. You can have 3 professions. Some of them are gathering professions, such as forester on this particular one, and farmer. Some of them are production professions, such as woodworker, as I have on this young little hobbit here. But you don't just choose any 3 professions. And this is where it's not as ideal. There are what are called vocations. And there are 7 vocations. So on this particular one, I have got the woodsman vocation. And it's a set 3 of them. Now, it sort of makes a little sense here because woodworkers need wood and forester can gather wood. So that will feed into that, no problem. The farmer one is just a one that supplies cooking, really. So, okay, there's nothing wrong with this particular combination. You know, I can make bows, which as a hunter is quite useful on this character. I can get the materials I need to make the bows, no problem at all. Farming, well, I can get crops and I could always sell them on the auction house. Okay, all self-sufficient. But on the character I was just on, the champion, He was what we'd call a historian, which is a scholar, weaponsmith and farmer. Now the scholar supplies itself, it's the one trade that supplies itself, and they make buff scrolls and potions, things like that. But then there's weaponsmith. Now the weaponsmith, as you imagine, makes metal weapons, so spears, swords, axes, that sort of thing. And you need prospecting to supply the raw metals for that. But is the other combination prospecting? No, it's farmer as well. So it is a very strange combination, which sort of, some people will argue it forces you to use the auction house to sell what you've got as surplus and to buy off other players what they have as surplus that you need. So it encourages an economy. I suppose there would be that argument. I just look at it as that's a bit of a pain in the arse, isn't it? That being said, the actual profession system is fairly decent. Now, the profession system in itself is reasonably interesting. For example, if I go to weaponsmith, which is something I have developed, what happens is, initially, as you can see here at the lowest level, I'm building up a bar of skill. When I fill that bar up, I'll be able to get access to the next tier down. But you've also got these yellow ones here. And these are mastery ones, so you can carry on getting better. And if I, for example, wanted to make a sword, a low-level sword, because I have mastery at this tier, so I can use the ingredients and I can make a bog-standard bronze sword. But there's a chance I'll crit. My base chance with what I've got at the moment is 25%. I can use another item to increase that by a further 45%. And there's a chance I will make a better version of it. Now, if you keep up with your professions, you can actually realistically use these for yourself, but where it's of more use, like in a lot of MMOs, when you're crafting gear, it's for alts that you've got coming up through as well. Now, I mentioned bartering before, so occasionally when you complete deeds, you get marks, which we can see in the wallet here. I've got 4,229, and you can use them in these skirmish camps, which you find around most sort of city areas, that you can turn in for different items, which might include, for example, weapons, which you can get from very low level up to actually quite high level. Now, if I try and find something that's roughly my level at the moment, a level 75 one-handed weapon. Now, I can sort of see on this one, 94.4 DPS. It's not as good as the ones I'm using. Getting items from group PvE, for example, is still going to be better for you. But let's say a particular piece of gear was falling a bit behind, then you can use those marks to get yourself something that'll get you in the game, which is a pretty good idea. If you're falling behind with reputation, you can also get items that increase your reputation with various factions. You can get crafting materials or patterns. You can get cosmetic items, furnishings for your home, or actual clothing for your own character. And it can even include armor, but just like the weapons, of course, it's not going to be as good as stuff you could get from group PvE, but it will be better than some quest armor that you haven't upgraded for about 10 or 20 levels. Now, when it comes to combat, the system varies from character to character, but I just realised I changed my specular to show you something. That's not one I'm not used to. So here we go. We've defeated all. That's part of a quest. But I've also got something flagged up here, which is the legendary item. And this is how things work here as well. It's not like in WoW at all. Legendary items be ultra rare things. These are very common items. And they're weapons and other trinkets which come from different ages of Middle-earth. So the Third Age ones are the least powerful. The Third Age, of course, is where we're in now. This is the period of time from the defeat of Sauron up to the destroying of the ring, which happens at the end of the Lord of the Rings, in which case they go into the Fourth Age. The Second Age is the sort of age of Sauron itself. Second Age weapons and items are more powerful, and it's a Second Age weapon that I've got. You can craft these. And then the First Age are the most powerful at all, for which you need to be doing proper endgame content. And these are the ones sort of at the time of Morgoth, I think, when the elves first came to Middle-earth. So you have a number of legendary systems in here. And the idea is you're just leveling them up as you go around. And then you upgrade them. And at a certain point, you break them down for raw materials, which you can then use on the legendaries you actually want to use. So some of these legendaries you will actually want to use. So there's my warhorse here, for example. And that's where we come on to something else. The warhorse. They have mounted combat in here, which came with the Rohan expansion. Unfortunately, it's very, very weird. This horse goes extremely quickly. I can't even remember the buttons that work, actually, for it. So I'm just going to press random buttons. But you can see here there's a massive amount of inertia on this thing. It's like slipping around on soap. And I've been watching other people's reviews of this as well. And the general consensus is that it is basically a load of rubbish. So we're going to get off this thing. Now the other thing to notice if I hover over it is not only does it tell me how many I need to kill for the quest, but there's also a Slayer deed for these as well. So if I look here, 5 out of 100. And this is just for the basic one. Remember I said there's usually 2 or even 3 parts to these Slayer deeds? So I have to kill 100 just to get to the first part. And you can think to yourself, I'm going to have to kill hundreds of these things to do it. That is a hell of a grind. Who can be bothered to do that? Well, you'll notice another button down here called Accelerate. So you can use scrolls to accelerate completing Slayer deeds, which basically means each time I kill 1, it'll actually count as 2. So it sort of halves the number you need. Now you can find these round and about. You might get them from your daily little Hobbit gift, for example. But if we have a look there, what's behind the accelerate button? Of course, the Lord of the Rings online store. And this is quite pervasive. Again, for any game that's essentially free to play, you should expect this. But for people that would find that really annoying, you are going to find this game really annoying. It's right there as well. The LOTRO store is a huge part of the game. And although you get a lot of things, if you subscribe as I do, where you don't really need to worry about this at all, nonetheless, it does keep tempting you with things. Now, coming on to that, in terms of the VIP, which is what they call the max subscription model there, if you just pay your usual £8 a month. One thing I would say, sort of against it, is that there's a lot of inconvenience with games that are free to play deliberately to try and get you to get things off the online store. One of which is it fills your bags up with all sorts of crap. Now I'm just going to show you something if I create a new character. So if I want to create a new character, for example, as we can see at the moment there are really 4 races. It looks like 5, but there's man, dwarf, hobbit and elf. There's also Bjorning, but that is only for one particular class. You can play the Bjorning class, which is very, very strange for a couple of reasons. First of all, there's not supposed to be a whole host of them. There used to be a big race of them, but they were effectively wiped out. So it does seem a little bit strange that we'd get to use this character. Also, I gather from looking up blogs and vlogs and things, the class is not as awesome as you might think. But if we go back to man here, there's a number of different classes we get to choose from. Now, these are sort of matched to archetypes within famous characters within the Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings books. So the burglar, of course, and in fact it tells you down who it's inspired by. The burglar, of course, is very much Bilbo Baggins. The captain, I would have thought, is much more like Aragorn, but in fact it actually talks down here about Éomer. The champion, very much Gimli. The guardian, I would have thought Boromir. It matches Boromir, but they were likening it to Samwise Gamgee. The hunter, of course, Legolas. Now, the Lawmaster is a strange character. This is like a mage-type character. Now, of course, you can't play a wizard in this game. It doesn't make sense lore-wise, because in Tolkien's Middle-earth and the Lord of the Rings stories and the Hobbit stories, there are 5 wizards, 3 of which are named, but there are 5 wizards. You can't be one of those 5 wizards. But, of course, a fantasy game needs spellcasters. So what do they do about this? They have the Lawmaster, which they liken to Elrond. But in reality, I don't think Elrond ever sent a bear into battle. These are a pet class. They summon beasts as pets. But they also put debuffs and dots and things on enemies. So they have some casting ability. Minstrels. It says it's inspired by Luthien. But it's... the Hobbit suits this one, if truth be told, because ultimately a minstrel is a healer, and it heals by playing the banjo. It actually literally plays music. It has an instrument and it plays the music, and that will buff and heal you. Think of like a bard in Dungeons and Dragons. And then there's a rune keeper, which is another spellcaster. I think this was added after the start of the game. I don't think this was out at the start of the game. And this can be an offensive caster, or it can be a healer as well. They can actually be very powerful. Then there's the Warden. The Warden is a class I absolutely love. Now, I always think of the Warden as being like the Riders of the Rohirrim, but in actual fact, it talks about Haldir as being the inspiration for this. The Warden has a very, very interesting playstyle, which I'll show in a moment. But just to create a character really quickly. So let's say I wanted to create a Hobbit, and I'm just going to call it Banjo Bow. No one will have called it that. And I've skipped, there's a new user tutorial, sort of have to go through once, but after that you can sort of tick a box to skip that forever after. It's just showing you some basics and gently easing you into the game. Here's what I wanted to show you in terms of the inconvenience side of it. If I open up my bags, this is a brand new character. It's absolutely rammed already. Now, a certain amount of this stuff is because I've bought expansions in the past and I've played the game in the past. But still, so some of these are like items from buying limited edition versions or upgraded versions. So you've got transmog gear in there. You've got mounts in there. But you've also got like gift boxes. So there's the first year gift box, the second year, third year, and so on. And if I open these out, it will open out into even more stuff to fill up my bags in the form of like buffs and potions and stuff like that I'd probably not get around to using, so it'll just sort of stay clogging my bags up. And this is actually quite annoying, and it's one of those things where you think it's quite an old game, and you can understand why it sort of wants to fill your bags up, because it wants you to buy more inventory space on the online store, because that's the thing. You can buy more inventory space. And it is quite good in that it gives you access to different types of inventory. So in terms of the different types of inventory, you've got your main vault, which is of course your bank. This is personal to you. Again, capacity there, but you could add space, again through the old LOTRO store. You've got other two types as well. You've got a shared storage space here, which you can access with any of your characters on this server. And also, you've got another shared chest in the personal house as well. And you've got a wardrobe one, which is where you can put your cosmetic items in. So you have got different types of storage, so it's pretty good. So as I was saying before, different classes do work very differently. They've got very unique systems of combat. The Warden is a very interesting one. And it's one I very much like, because instead of having lots and lots of abilities, it's, for most combat, effectively has 4 buttons you'd need to use, but it's combinations of them, a bit like playing Tekken. So you have the Gambit system. So for example, and you have 3 systems. You have like a spear strikes, a shield slam, and a shout. So if I use my spear, for example, and then I use another spear, it creates in here a gambit for another ability. So if I hit my gambit button, it carries out that attack. But then there's other combinations. If I do a spear, followed by a shield, that creates a boot that can be used to interrupt, say, or stun someone. But eventually, you can see in the gambit thing here, there's up to 5. So that means there's a lot of combinations of abilities that this has access to. And, you know, people have been very helpful. They've come up with charts to try and remind you of these ones, so you can look up quickly which combinations do what. But you can straight away see what the issue with this one is. It's a really fun combat system. It's not fiddly. You don't have to have lots of binds for it. But the downside is, if it's a character that you pick up now and then, play it for a few weeks, and then don't play it for a few months and come back to it, you'll have forgotten all those abilities. Very difficult to get into. Now, as I said, with this unique system, the minstrel, for example, effectively plays music to do its stuff. But it gets better than that. There are actually instruments that you can play in the game, and there is a bit of a community of people who will do this. You can see on YouTube some really good bands who effectively have playing music in the game with the in-game instruments. It tends to be quite a big thing. Of course, you can also imagine some people trying to do this and making a proper arse of it. So you'll also be pleased to know that in the options you can turn off player music as well. So if I were to do a final summary, what I would say in terms of the strengths of this game is, first of all, it is an extremely faithful representation of Tolkien's world. And I mean the books, not the films. There is occasional nods to the film, but effectively this is the story of the books. And it has a strong narrative through it in terms of the main quest lines. The main quest lines effectively seeing you supporting the Fellowship of the Ring. You occasionally do bump into members of the Fellowship and meet with them, but you're sort of always shadowing them. You're helping them. You're maybe defeating orcs that would otherwise intercept them, or other forces of the enemy, for example. What this means is that the actual main storylines are usually very strong, usually very interesting, introducing you to lands and places and even creatures that may not have been directly part of the Lord of the Rings story, but was mentioned by Tolkien or written by him, but not necessarily form part of the story, because that was what is so very apparent about a lot of his works. He also wrote about things that were not directly involved in any storyline, but you get to see it realised here. The other benefits is there's always things to do. If you're into games where there is a certain amount of grind, and I was discussing this on the stream last night, and some people sort of quite like it, putting on a bit of music and going around killing 100, 200 of a particular type of mob to get a trait would actually be something that appeals to some people. Of course, if it doesn't appeal to you, then potentially this one won't. In terms of bad things, then some of them are fairly apparent. This is a game that does look very dated. It's 10 years old. I have to say that when it came out 10 years ago, there were certain aspects of it that I thought were a little bit old-fashioned even then. You can see that it's a 32-bit game. So comparing it with World of Warcraft, it's actually really strange. Like, I much prefer the art style in this game. I think it's very nice. I think the skies are very good, but you can clearly see where the quality is not quite there. So the art department have done a brilliant job in realising Tolkien's world, and it's superb, but they're let down by the technology effectively with the game. And it's not something that, even though it's been taken over by a different company, that's going to be changed. As I say, my understanding, I have very little understanding, that because I don't play this game a lot. My understanding is the new company are basically a core of people who worked on this at Turbine, and so they're doing it really to keep the game going on, but we're not going to see a huge injection of resources in order to completely update the engine or anything like that. That doesn't sound realistic. In fact, the community itself, for many years now, it's struck me as being a game that can't have very many players. Of course, we know with an MMO, you don't actually need that many players for it to keep going and for expansions to keep coming out, because new content has come out. Some of that content is not necessarily all that engaging. For example, when I came into this zone, effectively I found myself doing quests where I was killing certain types of mobs. Okay, kill quests and collect quests are very common in MMOs, not knocking that. But at the same time, then I would go and turn those in and get some quests, and oh, hey ho, these quests were also to kill more of those mobs and things like that. And it's like, So, and then you come into some other zones and it's actually quite good, and the storyline's quite good and engaging. So it can be very hit and miss in terms of the variety of quests to do. The community is itself, as far as I can tell, it's what you would call probably very small but dedicated. Now, like with any MMO, it's quite difficult to infer just how many people play the game. What I would note is that if you try and look up Lord of the Rings videos on YouTube, you don't really come across any big YouTubers that is anything like 100,000 plus subscribers that do exclusively Lord of the Rings online content. The only fair-sized people that I've seen doing any videos at all tend to do it for other content, and they just happen to do some Lord of the Rings Online content. So in terms of Lord of the Rings Online specific YouTubers, I have not found any that have got more than 2,000 or 3,000 subscribers. So that suggests, don't prove, but it does suggest that it's quite a small community. But it does seem to be a quite dedicated community. As such, I am told, and I've certainly not seen anything to dispute this, that it's a much friendlier community. You can ask things in general without getting chewed out. I haven't seen any real trolling going on. There are problems with gold sellers occasionally popping up in the general channel. That's something that, I mean, World of Warcraft had for some years, but they've largely managed to get on top of that, whereas in this game they don't seem to have done. In terms of whether I would recommend this for people, what I would say is if you are a very strong Tolkien fan, you absolutely love Tolkien's world, and you want to go, because there is no other game, zero games that have this attention to detail and also the sheer size of it. I mean, you can go anywhere. You can follow the path through the Hobbit story. You can follow the path through the Lord of the Rings story. Of course, not all of it just yet, because the way they've worked it out is they've brought out expansion by expansion a little bit more of the storyline. So 10 years later, we're finally getting to the gates of Mordor. So that's why I was initially fearing maybe the end is in sight. Maybe just a few more years and that's it. Well, time will tell on that one. It looks like these new people, Standing Stones, want to actually carry on the game even beyond the story of the ring. So we'll see what happens there. My personal hope would be that another company wants to do another Lord of the Rings MMO and actually update it, but put the same amount of love that this game has had into it. The other bad thing about it, although it's a necessary evil, you could argue, because it's got the free-to-play model, and it's a very strong free-to-play model where, in theory, you can actually play it for free, it means it does have a very in-your-face online store where you can get a lot of things. For example, I had a set of professions that I'd had for some time. I was realizing, because I like professions in MMOs, I was thinking to myself, right, I really need to get all the professions because I do like to have all of them be self-sufficient. The fewest number of characters you can have and have all the professions is 4. And it basically meant I had to change the professions on this character. So I've gone around farming for the profession, my new professions. It's taken a little time. Now, I could go onto the online store and get an item that will instantly boost those professions straight up to max. But again, that's another thing where it's tempting you on the online store. And before you know it, if you go on the online store, you could go, oh, that'd be good and that'd be good. There's so many items for both convenience and power for your character that you could easily be spending hundreds of dollars or pounds or whatever is your currency without really thinking about it. So obviously you have to sort of be a little bit careful there, especially as a casual player who might think to myself, well, I don't have the time to farm all these deeds and all the rest of it. But nonetheless, you do want to be a little bit careful of that. And it is very in your face. It does keep reminding you that, oh, you can get this on the online store. Oh, you can get that on the online store. I hope you enjoyed this review. As I say, I am going to be streaming with the Mordor expansion. Hopefully that'll go in. I don't know what expansion opening is going to be like, and I don't think necessarily anyone does at this point because it's a new company. Hopefully it'll all be stable. Hopefully the servers will be stable. I have played starts of expansions before in this game and it's been fine. So I'm very much hoping the same will still apply. But we'll find out on Monday when I'll be streaming from 2 PM UK time up until about an hour before the raid, because I've got to raid in World of Warcraft later that evening. But I'll give it a few hours. So until then, I'll see you later.